Welcome to the first we will see in Q&A. I just thought it'd be interesting because obviously I'm the one usually asking loads of questions or rambling on videos. So I thought it might be a good idea I know that some people are not that confident in reaching out. So I just thought this would be an interesting opportunity. If I'm boring or ramble too much or I'm annoying, let me know. Any feedback, as long as it's constructive, is welcome. And we'll put a stop to it. But if you guys enjoy it, let me know and we'll try and make it a regular thing. Right, let's get into the questions. Got them here. I'll start off with the easy questions, so hopefully they'll be quicker to answer and get into the more long-winded ones later. So, first one from Stephen Johnson. Will you be at Winter Clash? And if so, what will you be getting up to? I will be at Winter Clash and drinking. So earlier in the year, Ricardo Lino reached out to me and he said he wanted me to help him out with something. He hasn't got back to me, but no doubt he'll spring it on me when I show up at the event. Yo-Yo Yacobi also got in touch, I think it was last month, to ask me if I could host some more panels. Last time we did Winter Clash, I did what it means to be pro, something about being retired, and I also hosted Brian Aragon Night at the Movies, so I'm assuming I'll be doing stuff like that again. If you see me at Winter Clash, come over and say hello. Feel free to quiz me and ask me any question you want, no matter how stupid, because that's what I normally do to my favourite people in blading. Next question is from Michael Goldsmith, and he asks, he's got two questions. First one, what have been the changes, for better or worse, you've seen in the YouTube landscape during the last few years in terms of rollerblading channels? The good is that there's loads of new ones popping up, so there's something for everyone. I don't watch all the content creators on YouTube because some of them are directed towards beginners, some of them are directed towards aspects of blading that I'm either over familiar with or just not that interested in, and some of them I'm really into. My favorite ones are mushroom blading, Ricardo Lino's, just because I think he's got a nice wide variety of content, and Jump Street Podcast. Other than that, I think Brandon and Tom do a really good job with the news, and I can't really think of other ones that I watch. Acosta Blades does like good tutorials and stuff. Again, not really directed towards someone who's been doing it for years and years and years, but I do see the value in it. And I think there's lots of interesting channels popping up. What don't I like about it? So I don't like people that spam their YouTube channels. So I hate people that upload every day. That really gets on my nerves, just because when you subscribe to them, you're like, oh my, it just floods your feed on YouTube, which I really don't like. And I just think if you're making videos that quickly or that frequently, then the quality of the content isn't going to be that great, or you're just, throwing up any old shite, basically. And I find that a bit grating. I also hate YouTube Shorts. I feel like that's what Instagram's for. Instagram, TikTok already do that. I don't use TikTok. But yeah, I just hate seeing, I've unsubscribed to people on YouTube just because they're uploading shorts all the time and I just can't handle it. I like it when people come up with concepts that I've just not thought of, or approach it in a new way that I find really interesting. Or I like it when you just find out little tidbits of information about people. For example, I recently found out that Alex Broskow is vegan. I did not know that, which I thought was pretty cool, just because I'm a nerd and little bits of trivia like that really appeal to me. Second question from Michael Goldsmith. Do you have a minimum time you'll use a product before doing a review? Yes, I do. Generally, it's a month.
Oh my God. My glasses! I can't see without my glasses!
The reason I started doing honest reviews is because I was watching reviews on YouTube and I just found them really grating. They didn't feel like reviews at all. In fact, more often than not, they just felt like either product descriptions or product promotions. The people were either testing them out not very thoroughly and then talking about their longevity or the resilience of the product. And it's like, if you only use a product for an hour or an afternoon, you have no idea about how tough it is, how well it stands up to abuse. And I find that when I try on a new pair of skates, I'm learning new things about them all the time for the first few weeks. Like, you're learning how how they work for certain grinds, how they work for certain movements, how they hold up to impact, how they feel after a long session. Like, do they start to get uncomfortable after a while? So when someone just tests a product out for like an hour and then has the audacity to talk about how it holds up, or, you know, just like in terms of how long it's going to last you, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. And it makes me just kind of not value their opinion. So when you watch honest reviews, more often than not, I'll have tried the product for a month. If the weather is terrible, like it is right now with the USD Sway, I think I only used them for 3 or 4 weeks, but that was sessioning them twice a week for at least 4 hours. And I was breaking parts off them. I was finding parts that I found problematic, but also loved the skate. So yeah, there you go. Although I'm also not a particularly brilliant skater, so take my advice or my observations with a grain of salt. Next question is from Josh Allen. Oh, he's got 2. Josh Allen, first off, asks, what do you think rollerblading will look like in 10 years? I have no idea, and that's one of the things I find most interesting about rollerblading. I find that it always kind of reacts to what went before it. So rollerblading was really ledge and handrail heavy in the 90s, and then it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and rollerblading reacted to being ostracized by skateboarding and extreme sports community by just trying to go as big as it could, be as tough as it could, and just prove we belong in the extreme sports community. We're doing bigger stuff than you. We're skating bigger obstacles, doing bigger tricks. And while it was impressive to watch, I did find myself feeling less and less like part of that community, because when I get into rollerblading, it's because it felt different to normal sports. It felt really punk rock and alternative and not like mainstream sports, and a good way to express yourself and very creative. And I felt like when that whole breakneck tech era came in and everyone was just doing drop rails and jumping off roofs and grinding off roofs and transferring handrails, it didn't feel as creative. It just felt very structured. Like, you have to do this. This is how you prove yourself. And I just didn't like that. I feel like now it's at its most creative point, where there's so much variety, so much, you know, you've got mushroom blading, wizard blading, people that skate smaller tech stuff like the Kelsos, or people that just really refine their tricks and do them really well. People like Ryan Parker and Cody Refner. And then you've still got people who just like to go absolutely buck, like Carlos Bernal, Michelle Prado, Nils Janssens. And then there's people that have been around the sport for ages who are still absolutely killing it, like Randy Spicer, John Julio, just people that have come back to the sport, like John Bellino, stuff like that. So I just think the way I see it going is, I imagine it's going to get bigger and people are going to start doing bigger tricks again, just because it's an inevitable cycle. It's happened in skateboarding, it's happened in BMX, it's probably going to happen in rollerblading as well. What I would like to see in the future is people making more of a concerted effort to get rollerblading out to a wider audience. So you've got things like Blading Cup, which I get why people slag off the course. The course is underwhelming, but people on the street, passers-by, see it. And that happens with almost no other skate contest. Winter Clash is incredible, one of my favorite events, but no one outside of the rollerblading community sees it, because no passers-by are walking past a skate park in the middle of an industrial estate. With Blading Cup, it's on a main street. People can just stumble upon it. A kid could see it for the first time and just latch onto it, like I did the first time I saw rollerblading on Sky Sports. I was like, what they're doing, I want to do that. I want to find out what that is. So I would like to see us basically strive for more mainstream exposure. I don't mean getting big sponsors like Adidas and Nike and stuff like that. I just mean getting it out to the general public again, because despite the fact we're on YouTube and things like that, people aren't really stumbling upon it on YouTube. More often than not, if they're seeing it, it's because they're searching for it. So yeah, I'd like to see us basically try and just get more recognition and exposure. Hope that answers your question. Another question from Josh Allen. What got you into making videos? So I've pretty much been making videos since 2012, I think. I bought my first camera off Chaz Sands. He sold me a DSLR, a Canon one, and the first thing I filmed was Scott Quinn's wheel scene section, which I feel incredibly bad about because I really butchered a lot of the filming and I didn't know how to use the camera. I was learning as I was going along. Sometimes I would switch it on, the entire screen would be yellow, and I had no idea why. It was basically because I didn't know how to adjust the white balance or the ISO, or there'd be times I'd just switch on the camera and not know what was going on with it. So I really screwed up a lot of that footage, and Scott, I apologize. Thankfully, we gave all the footage to Anthony Medina, and managed to fix a lot of it and edit it in a way that made it not look as bad, but there's still some footage in there that I look at and I'm like, Jesus Christ. There's also clips that Ant just flat out refused to use because he was like, no, what were you thinking? After that, Ant also told me he refused to ever use anyone else's footage. The only footage he would ever use is footage that he filmed. I like to think that my filming's got better since then. We also released a full-length video, Primary. I've released a bunch of sections, park life sections for people in Scotland. And then when I turned the website off at the start of the year, I turned it off because I just wasn't visiting rollerblading sites. Like I wasn't visiting BMAG or One. And I was like, why am I running a rollerblading website if I'm not visiting them? I just think the culture shifted in a different direction. It's all turned into videos and social media. So started making content that way. And it's basically just an extension of me writing articles, except instead of writing articles, I'm talking about it. And with Platform, the podcast, I actually wanted to do it for years and years. And every time I've interviewed someone, more often than not, it's either over Skype or over phone call or over FaceTime. So I've always had the recordings of the audio, and it's always really annoyed me that the recordings have so much more life about them than the articles do. Like you just miss a lot of the jokes or a lot of the humor or a lot of the kind of stuff that people express in their tone of voice. And I tried to turn it into just an audio podcast years and years ago. I sent all the files over to my friend and he was like, we're not going to be able to make this broadcast quality, essentially. And then Jump Street started doing the podcast, and it reminded me of Nine Club. They're all together in the studio. They've got people passing by in New York. And I just thought, that's great. They're doing it. And I was sending in loads of questions for people at the start, probably still frequently do. And I thought Billy and Austin did a great job, but there was just loads of things they weren't asking that I would have asked just because they've got different interests than me. And then I started thinking maybe I should do one separate to Jump Street. But then lockdown happened and Jason Adriani started doing his blading chats. A couple other people started doing theirs, and I was like, oh, this is becoming a bit oversaturated. So lost interest in the idea. Then Jason stopped doing his and the other people stopped doing theirs just because life got in the way. And I was like, right, with Zoom, there's a chance to do it. So I started reaching out to people that I'd already interviewed for the print publication or for the website, and they were all keen. And that's how Platform started. The goal was to try and not interview people that had been on Jump Street just so that it was something different for people to watch. But inevitably there has been overlap because we know the same people, or there's not that many people at the top of the sport. But I do think Platform's had quite a few people on it that have never been on Jump Street. So that's quite good. It gives people some variety. And I do think we tackle different subjects than what are tackled in Jump Street. So yeah, but Jump Street podcast is amazing. I watch it all the time. And yeah, love it. Billy, Austin, you guys are awesome. Other questions, right? Oh God, this is a huge one. Nathan Bentley, I'm curious about the origin of wheel scene. I need a history lesson. What were the original goals of the platform? What were the specific challenges besides the industry recession that impacted your original efforts with print and other products? Right, so how did wheel scene start? I have always been into writing. I've always been into making stories. I used to write for Unity magazine for years. So if you've ever picked up a copy of that when you were younger, you've probably seen my name in there. I did a bunch of articles. I did an IMYTA Amsterdam article. I interviewed people like musicians like Josh Martinez, Kevin Dowling, God, so many, I can't actually remember. And then when Unity magazine closed down, I randomly got a check for like £300 or £350 from the editor, Steve Glidewell. So that was a welcome surprise because I always was under the assumption I was just writing for free. Then I wrote for BMAG for a few years. I interviewed Austin Paz, interviewed Jeff Howard, Lonnie Gallegos, a bunch of other people I can't remember off the top of my head. And then about a year or two after I finished university, I moved down to London to try and become a music journalist. And it was just incredibly hard. I was doing internships for like 45 hours a week, working in a bar like 30, 40 hours a week in the evening on top of that, just running myself into the ground, doing all these internships, and just realized how incredibly competitive and difficult it was down in London, and all these people that were willing to work for free because their parents had money or they could just afford, people just supplementing them and paying their rent and stuff like that. I didn't have that, so I found it a lot tougher. But I did an internship at a magazine called Huck Magazine, which is still going today. They do skateboarding, snowboarding, art, music, film and stuff like that. And that was really cool because it was working in a professional office, got to interview bands like Hot Chip and stuff like that. And who else? Far. We did an entire issue of the magazine on Deftones, which is awesome because they're one of my favorite bands of all time. And that was just really cool working in a kind of professional atmosphere. I learned how to do websites in terms of making photos optimal for web, like tags and stuff like that, just writing for online copy. So got a lot of experience doing that. Then I started working for a publication called The Stool Pigeon, which was one of the biggest European free music publications. I worked there for like 6 or 7 months, and I learned everything about invoicing, stockist lists, got all these contacts for record labels and press companies, and found out about advertising and stuff like that. So there I formulated the plan to move back to Glasgow, start my own thing. It wasn't meant to be called Wheel Scene originally. It was meant to be called Wheel C. And there was a whole advertising campaign around rollerblading's dead, rollerblading's easy, rollerblading's, no one rollerblades anymore. And the tagline would have been Wheel C. So we apostrophe LLC. One of my friends misheard me and said, oh, Wheel Scene, that's interesting for a music and rollerblading publication because wheels are applicable to sports and also applicable to music in that DJ's Wheels of Steel. And I was like, oh yeah. And because I was just so quick to get it off the ground, I just went with the name. Now I kind of hate the name and wish I'd never went with it. But I don't really know if I could change it at this late stage. I haven't decided yet. I think that's something that still plays in my mind all the time. When I started the publication, I realized one vital information too late. People lie. So I did market research. I contacted OWEN and BMAG and Roller News and pretended I was starting a skate company and wanted advertising rates. And they all gave me advertising rates. BMAG said they were charging like €1,000 for a full page. And I was like, cool, I'll charge less than that. We're going to print 10,000 copies. That's more than BMAG. I'll start contacting advertisers. So I went to the bank. I think I had like £1,000. And I tried to get a bank loan, and the bank manager basically told me to fuck right off. That's never going to happen, but gave me an overdraft, £5,000 overdraft, which they're quite happy to hand out. And when we started working the first issue, I realized all the other publications were lying, essentially. Jake from Local Skates said, I've never paid €1,000 for a full page advert in BMAG, and I've advertised in them multiple times. Turns out OWEN were also not being truthful about their rates, and Roller News were claiming to have like 1 million visits a month or something like that. Something weird. I saw, some emails they sent to like other people that advertised, and I was like, that's just not true at all. So yeah, that was a steep learning curve, and basically maxed out the overdraft within about a year, just because we were printing 10,000 copies. It was going out to around Europe, America, sending copies to Australia, just basically trying to get it out there as much as possible. It was in music venues, it was in record stores, skate parks, skate shops, just random bars, student unions. And it was just really cool hearing people get in contact to be like, oh God, rollerblading still exists. People still do this. I went to see a band and just ended up picking up a copy. Towards the end, it was breaking even, and we're basically not making money, but we're getting the money back that we're paying for printing and distribution. And then the bank called one day and just said, we're putting a stop to your overdraft and you need to pay the money back. And that was the end of the print publication. I couldn't keep doing it without the money. I didn't want to get myself into more debt. The interest rate on the overdraft was ridiculous. It ended up after late fees and interest and stuff like that, I ended up basically paying back 10 grand or something like that out of my own money. And at the time I was working as a temp, earning like maybe 15 grand a year. So it took me like 4 or 5 years to pay off the debt. So yeah, it was a steep learning curve, but we got 10 issues out. I never made a penny off it. Basically did everything myself apart from the layouts for the print publication. That was done by Graham Patrick and Gareth Lindsay. Everything else, commissioning photographers, writing articles, deciding what was on each page, doing the taxes, doing everything online. Like that was all me. Yeah. So I was basically working like 12, 13-hour days trying to get the print and online, just constantly going. And that was exhausting, but I learned a lot, met some good people, and don't regret it. Another question from Nathan. I would be interested in hearing your thoughts on the current state of inline media. Oh, God. That's a really difficult question to answer just because it's so broad ranging. Like you've got all these brands putting out really great content and promoting their stuff really well and doing really interesting projects. Them skates are obviously at the forefront of that, just with all the, it feels like a week doesn't pass without something being released by them, whether it's a product or a promo or some kind of thing. So they're really killing it right now. Rosie's also doing an amazing job. I feel like USD skates don't really get the credit they deserve because they've been around for ages, but they still regularly put out great content. And they have a phenomenal team. Aside from that, I feel like it's the era of the content creator, and that's why I started getting more involved with the YouTube channel, because people aren't buying print publications. People aren't advertising in print. You know, when I ran Wheel Scene, none of the major skate brands advertised with us. None. We were basically surviving off Head and Skate, local skates in like smaller shops supporting us. If it wasn't for them, it wouldn't have happened. None of the skate brands, USD, Razors, them, Rems, none of them wanted to know about it. And even now, like if you look on rollerblading websites, you don't really see adverts for the big brands. And if you do, I'm willing to bet they're not paying a lot of money for it. So there's not, because why would they? They want to put their money into social media. They want to put their money into things that give a return, like their YouTube channels and stuff like that, or things that they can quantify. They can't really quantify what an advert does on someone else's website. So yeah, I think it's the era of the content creator. I think people like, God, who's doing an amazing job? Ricardo Lino, Tom Moyes, Brandon Drummond. There's basically a bunch of people that are, you know, getting decent views. They're making a little bit of money from it here and there, and just giving us some kind of representation on YouTube, which I think is important. I think if people search for rollerblading on there, they're going to find that there's a lot of new content coming out all the time. And I think that's important, because when you develop a new interest in a hobby or whatever, and you want to start exploring it, it's important that you can see stuff like that, see multiple sources, see things that, you know, one person might watch Tom and might be like, oh, that's really funny, I really like that. Someone else might be like, oh, that's quite annoying, I'm not into that. I just want the facts. I just want, you know, information. And that's where someone like Ricardo Lino or Brandon comes in. That's quite interesting. I just think there's so many different avenues of rollerblading right now that there is something for everyone. Like there's something that everyone can enjoy, whether it's the podcast like Jump Street and Platform, where you can learn trivia, you can learn information about your favorite skaters, or it's going on and watching tutorials and learning how to do certain tricks that are eluding you so far, or you want to find out about products, or you just want to go and watch awesome skating. There is something online just for everyone, and it's just our job to try and get it out there as much as possible, expose it to as many people as possible, and just make sure we have a presence so that if people do come looking for us, they can find us and they can find great quality stuff that will get them inspired to rollerblade or keep rollerblading. So I think that's been our main issue in the past 20, 30 years. We've managed to get people into rollerblading. We've managed to get people excited about it, but we've not managed to retain them. And I think that's what we need to do a better job of. Like once they start, keep them pumped, whether it's, you know, from events or whether it's from inspirational media or just stuff that makes people want to keep putting on their skates. I think that's the main thing, like keeping them. I've lost count of the amount of things I've tried and then been like, yeah, not for me. Or I've tried it, had a little bit of an interest, and it's just waned. With rollerblading, I was just hooked. I knew within 48 hours of starting rollerblading that I was going to be doing it for the rest of my life. I remember I think it was like the second day, like I went out skating with my friends. Basically I knew a bunch of people in school that rollerbladed, so I got a pair of skates for Christmas, went out on Boxing Day with them. The very next day I woke up, grabbed my skates and ran out the house to go meet those same people again, and we were skating for like 8-9 hours a day every day in the Christmas holidays. It was wet, there was snow, there was ice, it was horrible, but we were just skating in it just because there was nothing else we wanted to do. And most of those people stopped. I never could. I was just always obsessed with it, and I just knew so early on that I could feel something change in me. I felt like a different person after I started skating, and I just knew that I would never stop. So yeah, hope that answers your question. That's all the questions I got this time. If you want to do this again, let me know in the comments. Yeah, any feedback would be greatly appreciated, and hope you guys found this interesting.